Hello and welcome back to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines, and this is our first Seminole Sidelines of the 2024 college football season. Jerry and Nick are joining me. Jerry and Nick, man, was waking up this morning, had a little extra pep into my step. Really couldn't sleep till my alarm went off. We've seen talking seasons from other conferences, the Big 12 2 weeks ago, the SEC last week, but obviously Florida State and the ACC got the ACC Kickoff underway today. And Mike Norvell, Patrick Payton, Darius Washington, and I believe Josh Farmer. We're up in Charlotte, and we have Bob and Kurt there reporting live, and they will be coming back tomorrow. But guys, obviously, as I said, a little bit more excitement in waking up on this Monday than last Monday, although last Monday was pretty good because I was on had a vacation day and I took it. No, listen, how excited are you guys for the 2024 season?
Really excited. It's starting to feel real. I kind of had the same idea as you, just waking up, feeling a lot better that football is that much closer. And I mean, I guess the good thing about having a week 0 game is that, Florida State's starting practice later this week, and it's only 4 short weeks until the games count again. So I'm really excited. I'm sure Jerry is too.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice starts on Wednesday. So that's
Yeah, Jerry, you and I have been around a long time. Have you ever been to a college football practice in July?
No.
I have not either. It just feels so random to think to sit here that even though it's July 22nd today, and less than 48 hours, actually in about 48 hours, we will have completed reporting on the first Florida State football practice for 2024. So it's going to be a quick. It always is. Once these practices start, the days keep on counting off, and Jerry will be in Ireland probably in about 3.5 weeks, Jerry. And so that's gonna really go quicker than we can even anticipate, because obviously the long part of the year is when there's no football, and now we're gonna have football every day. So listen, it's an exciting time to be around the program. Florida State is favored to be back in the ACC championship game. We're gonna get into a whole lot of ACC conversation as we bring Seminole Sidelines back on a more regular basis, since we are here with the fall, and we'll get into who Florida State will be competing with for the ACC, a chance to go to the ACC championship game. But Jerry, a lot going on coming off a 13-1 season. Mike Norvell, as you put on the message board, it's hard to believe we're into the 5th year of the Mike Norvell tenure. Florida, let's just talk about that a little bit, Jerry, because you have more of a probably a historic perspective than Nick and I do. You've been around Florida State longer than either one of us, but this was a rudderless program for close to 4 or 5 years until they brought Mike in. And just tell us about the importance of the continuity of keeping Mike here and what it means for this football program going forward.
It's critical. Continuity is so important, as everybody knows. Everybody listening knows that. And so nothing new there. But it is 5 years, and really he's held his coaching staff together through, what has there been, 1 or 2 changes in the 5 years?
Yeah, Woodson left to go to Arkansas, and then Dillingham left to go to Arizona State. So you've brought in Pat Surtain to replace Woodson at the beginning or after last season, and then obviously Tokarch is also going to be in his second season as a QB coach. Was last year
third. His third.
Yeah,
something along those lines.
Yeah. I couldn't remember how long Kenny had been in Arizona State. For some reason, I thought Kenny had only been in Arizona State 1 year, but I don't know. Time flies.
It does. Yeah, it's. I think it's critical. I was speaking to an Extra Point Club the other day and talking about the impact Norvell has on this program, and I made the comment that we deserve him, and he deserves us. We talk about fits, and when you talk to the Extra Point Club, you're talking to women who have been around the Florida State program longer than I have, and there is a fit. And that's a big deal when you're going into a season like this one, that, everybody knows your coach knows everybody. There's no mysteries.
Yeah. And I think it's been good for the program. Like, as you guys said, only 2 coaches have left Mike in 2 years. And one of those was for a head coaching job. So you certainly can't hold that against Dillingham. It's so I think, and as you well know, Jerry, going back to Florida State's, I guess, dynasty era, the staff continuity was a very big thing with that run. You did not have hardly any turnover with the staff from the time the run, the 10 wins plus season started in 87 through, I can't remember how long it went through, almost, 99. But you had very little changeover. Had some guys come back during that time. Amata came back as assistant coach, I believe, after he left for NC State. But certainly Mike's done a great job of keeping the staff intact. And, I think that's been a big help. Listen, we're going to talk a little bit about some the ACC network or ACC Extra, because we are in Tallahassee. Kurt and Bob are on site in Charlotte, and they will be cutting their own podcast either tonight or tomorrow. But there were some technical difficulties throughout the day with the ACC's broadcast, and online, not on television. But unfortunately, the ACC does not show the entirety of the head coaches' interviews on their network. They only do that online, which is disappointing from a fan perspective. But Mike did say a couple things. Listen, they're going to get out of the gate real quick with 2 conference games, and then probably one of the tougher group of 5 games in all of college football for a Power 4 program. But he mentioned that the first 2 games are being ACC games. Has helped the sense of urgency with that team. I mean, I'm can sit here and ask you how important it is Florida State to get off to a fast start. But we've seen Florida State open with LSU the previous 2 years, guys. So they had to open with sense of urgency the last 2 seasons. So I think this is a team, particularly with its veterans that have been through this. Do you think this team, I mean, it lost a lot of leaders, right? It lost Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, and probably more importantly, Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, a lot of guys that were considered leaders on this football team. Does the fact that Florida State lost so many leaders on the football team give you any concerns with opening up with such an important game?
I'll start. I mean, I think defensively, no. I expect the defense will, start pretty hot. They've got enough leadership back on defense that I feel comfortable with that. And I think our special teams will be fine. You wonder a little bit about the offense because you got a new quarterback and receivers that haven't done it yet. But there is good leadership on that offensive line and I think in the running back room. Not to mention there are some veterans coming back among the receiver group.
Yep.
So if I have any concern at all, it's always offense. Starting the offense tends to start slower than defense, so that would be my only start.
Nick, any concerns on your end on starting with a conference schedule with losing so much leadership off last year's team?
I don't know if I would use the word concern. I think I'd use the word intrigue. I mean, both the offense and the defense lost key guys, but then when you actually take a look up and down the roster, especially on the offensive side of things, they still have guys like Darius Washington. You got Maurice Smith on the specifically those 2 on the offensive line. And then you do have leaders in the backfield with Toafili. Now, I think if you're looking for an area where's that leadership going to come from? It's the wide receiver group, who's going to step up in that room. So, I mean, I don't want to cop myself out and say, I don't know if there should be any concern. It's more of an intrigue really, Pat, to see it's like, okay, who's going to step up? Does somebody need to step up? How well is DJ going to take the helm of that offense? These are all questions and storylines that, we'll all be looking towards as we start camp on Wednesday.
I think I was going to say Patrick Payton and Darius Washington had some nice comments about DJ's leadership this summer. They were impressed with him. And Patrick singled out what all the fans noticed, which is, his decision not to go up to the ACC meeting so that one of his teammates could go instead and experience that. And they were saying that was the sign of leadership of Travis, was that he was an unselfish leader, good teammate first, and they're seeing that in DJ.
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty cool thing that DJ did. I'm not sure how many. Well, I'm not going to call them kids because these guys are they're 23 and 24 and getting paid a lot of money. I'm not going to call them kids, but I don't know how many people his age would have the awareness to do what he did, because we live with social media and Twitter and everything else. We live in a me society. Everybody's worried about their own brand, their own time in the spotlight. And I thought it said a lot for DJU as a 6th-year guy in college football and a new member of this team to allow the spotlight to be shown on guys that were a part of getting Florida State back to the national conversation with football was pretty cool. So listen, we saw some of DJ's leadership and the way, I can remember watching a video clip of spring practice after we'd been to spring ball, and DJ throws a touchdown pass and a going in period, and the guy that's most excited on the whole team is Brock Glenn, and I think that spoke more about DJ than it did Brock. Although it was cool to see Brock be excited about the guy he's competing for the starting job with, being that excited for the competition. But obviously, DJ had endeared himself to that quarterback room, and obviously, based on the comments that Patrick and Darius said, has endeared himself to the what's probably more important, the offensive line. You got Darius vouching for him. So so that was a good deal. Another couple of things that Mike said. He said the buy-in in the summer workout program was as good as he's had here. He kind of intimated that it might have been the best buy-in they've had. Listen. I think it's important. I don't know that he would have told us if it was bad. I don't know if any head coach would. But when you hear something like that, Nick, from Mike heading into the season, and listen, this, with each passing year, this turns into more of a year-round sport than it ever has been before. But just how did that make you feel when you heard Mike say that today?
Kind of to your point, it's like, I don't think he would have told us if it was bad. I kind of took it matter-of-factly. I would sincerely hope that there's buy-in, especially how the end of last season went. We're not going to spend too much time talking about that, but it's good to see the continued buy-in of this team, and that's something that we talk about Norvell going into his 5th year. We've slowly seen more and more continued buy-in with each and every year, and it just appears to be a stronger bond between the players on this roster every single year. So my reaction was I would hope that they were bought in after, the way things ended. And, if Norvell's happy with it, I think, there's reason to be excited about, what we see in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I can't wait to see how the guys look on Monday. We always think there's not going to be a lot of change in them physically because we just saw them in April. But what we forget about is how transformative the weight room can be and the sun can be in over 3 months for these guys. And so, we noticed some small changes from January until April when we saw the guys in spring. Certain guys had changed the way their bodies looked. So I can't wait to see who looks like they spent all summer working out and who doesn't. That's always fun to see. The eye test on the first day of practice is always fun to see who's coming in better shape than ever have been before. Now, one thing that Mike said today that did surprise me a little bit, he said he thought this was as deep as his defense has ever been at Florida State. I thought last year's was pretty deep, particularly on the defensive front. To me, they're not that deep. And I'll start with you, Jerry. Do you agree that Florida State is as deep on defense as Mike tends to believe it is, or is he just trying to breathe it into life by speaking it into life? Is that a thing where he is talking to his team through the media?
No, I happen to agree with it. When I was doing that linebackers segment preview, there's a lot of guys there. I mean, you're looking to find a second, and you got about 9 that are competing for the job. I think back to last year, and I liked our starting defensive ends, but I thought there was a big drop off, and I don't think there's going to be this year from the 1 to the 2 on the defensive lines. Ends. So that's better depth. And I think as you look at the defensive front, I think we can get 2-3 deep and be, have guys with a little bit of experience coming in the game. And then finally, in the secondary, I think we have a lot of bodies. I don't know how good the second team is yet, but there's a lot of young guys there, rising freshmen and sophomores, who are talented. So, yeah, there's depth. But so I would agree. I do think there's better depth.
Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I think I intend to agree. I think especially with the pieces that Norvell brought in defensively in the transfer portal. I mean, I don't know if it's the deepest that it's been like top to bottom, but I think the gap between the ones and the twos is probably decreased a little bit, especially at the defensive end position, where you have guys coming in like Tomiwa Durajayi and Siona Lolohia, like those guys being able to be either ones or twos behind Marvin and Pat Payton on the ends. I think that there is some real good depth there at defensive tackle. But behind, Farmer and Jackson, we'll see who kind of emerges in the next couple weeks. But I think especially, with the transfers that they brought in, especially on the back end with Little, the gap between the ones and the twos has started to close a little bit more, and there's definitely more depth. I can't say like Mike says it's the deepest that they've ever been. Again, that's one of the things that we'll have to see.
Well, I think that you're right, but I think half the reason that there's not as much drop off is because the top end guys, Jared Verse, the competition between whoever replaces him and his backup is going to be much closer than whoever backed up Jared last year. And same thing with Braden Fisk, and he leaves, and so the difference between defensive tackle 1 and defensive tackle 2 is going to be closer than it was last year, and so forth and so on. I think Tatum Bethune, Florida State didn't have a lot of depth at linebacker this year. We'll find out about it this year, but yes. So I think two things can be true at one time. I do think the drop off is smaller, but I don't think the frontline guys are. I'm not ready to make Josh Farmer Braden Fisk yet. He's got to show me he's Braden Fisk. I'm not ready to make Patrick Payton Jared Verse. So I think there's some. I think there's some. Now is Payton's going to be a good player. I'm not saying that, but I just think the frontline players on defense last year were so good. And listen, I've heard everybody talk about Earl Little since he stepped on campus. I hope he's as good as everybody says he is, because he did not play a ton of football last year. And to Jerry's point, there are a lot of bodies in the secondary. We're going to kind of go through a brief breakdown of each position group as we go through this podcast. We're going to try to make it very quick because we've got 30 days to talk about each position group, and things will change because there will be injuries and position moves and all manner of things as the season goes on, or as preseason camp goes on. But yeah, listen, I think this is a fascinating time to be around the program. I think once we get into camp, and listen, there's some new bodies that come in, we're going to have a different opinion of this team's depth than we did coming out of spring, because you've added Jacob Rizzi at center and guard, and you've added Cam Riley at one of the linebacker positions. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, what we think those guys have added in camp. I think that's going to be fun to follow.
At Aviva Stadium in Dublin, the home of the
Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Let's start talking a little bit. Not like I said, we got a ton of time, so let's just hit on some of these position groups pretty quickly, guys. We talked a little bit about DJU earlier. Jerry, what are your expectations for DJU? Okay. And then what is the importance of Brock Glenn and or Luke Kromenhawk, whoever comes out of camp number 2, which is one of the biggest questions that's going to be answered because it's going to have long-term effects on this program moving forward. We're not going to get into all that. Let's just worry about the 2024 season right now. But what are your expectations for DJU this year?
I expect him to struggle a little bit at first. I expect – I don't mean struggle, but I think he'll be a better quarterback game 5, game 8 than he will be in game 1. I just think it would be hard for me to imagine he comes out of the gate right, fast with the uncertainty there is still as to who your go-to receivers are. Now, having said that, let me mitigate that. This summer, the coaches got to work with the quarterbacks and the receivers, so they may have made up a lot of that gap, right? We didn't used to get that kind of time. So that would be my concern with DJ, would just be how accurate is he? How fast does he start? What offense do they put in for him to where he can start at the level they want him to start at?
Yeah, and I think that the biggest asset that Florida State has going to it in bringing in a first-year, one-year quarterback is that the offensive line should be the strength of this football team. Florida State should be able to run the ball, which will benefit DJ and what DJ does best, which is push the ball down the field where he's inconsistent. His shorter passing game, intermediate passing game, that's where he struggled with his completion percentage. He's accurate downfield. He throws a beautiful ball. So I think that Florida State can't help him. And Mike said today he wants him to have the best year of his life on the football field, off the football field. So listen, and he's going into his 4th year as a starter. It is conceivable that he could play his best. Nick, what are your thoughts on DJU?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. What kind of offense is he going to be running earlier on in the season? The offensive line and the running game are probably going to have to bear at least a good portion of the load earlier on because we all know what DJ's strength is, and that's the deep ball. Unfortunately, Mike's offense, especially last year, was a lot of RPO action and then hitting play action, medium passes, and then occasionally taking deep shots down the field when you have 6'7" and 6'4" receivers with Wilson and Coleman, and they're not there anymore. You've replaced them with speedsters with guys like Jalen Brown and Malik Benson. So, you have pieces there to be able to enable DJ to, throw the type of throws that he likes to make. But what kind of offense are they going to set up for him in year 1? Look, you just got to hope that and look for him to be serviceable. Don't throw the ball or don't turn the ball over. Really allow the running game to get going behind that offensive line. That's going to be probably more improved, would you say, Pat, this year than they were last year?
Yeah, should be.
So, that's what I'm expecting from DJ. And, what I'm looking to see is, can you be serviceable out of the gate? To Jerry's point, he's going to improve over the course of the year. So early on, don't turn the ball over. See what kind of offense Norvell has planned for DJ.
Yeah, and I think the other fascinating question is going to be if you're Mike and you're Tony Tokards, you are going to make the quarterback competition for number 2 last until whatever bowl game they go to.
Yeah.
You're going to make those two battle all week so that no one gets complacent. But I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. Who's next? Is it Brock or is it Luke? And then because of the way teams practice, and additionally, neither one of those guys played in the spring game, guys, spring showcase, whatever the hell you want to call it. So they lost some live reps. And those are the only live reps they get. They don't go to the ground, as far as I know, not at the practices we see. Now, maybe at one of the scrimmages they did. But I think it's going to be fascinating. And we can talk about this later, but I just think it's going to be fascinating to see how Mike and Tony try to get those two guys experience this year, because outside of North Alabama and maybe a couple others, most of these games you're playing, maybe they'll get some garbage time in some games we're not expecting there to be garbage time in. But there's Memphis is not Duquesne. You're probably not gonna find. Hopefully for Florida State, they'll find a comfortable moment in that Memphis game. But Memphis is one of the better teams in the group of 5 conferences, and so I think it's gonna be fascinating to see how they get Luke or Brock in the game. How much they play, when they play, and as they try to get it, and as they use this bridge year, as I've heard everybody refer to DJU's year at Florida State. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And Jerry, since you mentioned it, I think one of the bigger question marks on this team, on this roster, we think there's potential there. You've mentioned that the fact that the quarterbacks and coaches got to work with the receivers this summer. And, of course, they've always done off-season 7-on-7 when it was player-regulated. So there's always an opportunity to build that chemistry that they might have lacked through the summer. But, listen, we could go through the names if we want to. Keon's gone. Johnny's gone. Jaheim's gone. Trey's gone. Jordan's gone. Who do we think is going to be wide receiver number 1? I thought it was going to be Des Hill. Des gets hurt. He's going to miss the season. Who are the Florida State's top 3 receivers, Nick? I mean, I'm not talking about who starts. I'm just talking about who you think, in your opinion, who's going to be the guys that get the first chance to prove themselves. Because right now we don't know who the go-to receiver is on this unit.
I think, well, you can take 2 trains of thought here. You can go by who's wide receiver number 1 in terms of talent, and then who's number 1 in terms of seniority. If you want to go by seniority, Kentron Portier is going to get the first crack of things. He's been there the longest. The way that Mike Norvell talked about him towards the end of last season, he's like, okay, Kentron's going to come on later. He liked what he saw, even though he didn't see the on-field results, and a lot of that was because who was ahead of him, right? But if you want to take a look at terms of talent, I think Malik Benson impressed with what we saw from him in the spring game. I think as he familiarizes with himself with the offense, he probably only gets better. So I think if I had to pick a name out of the hat, I think Benson's probably your wide receiver 1 going into this season. And then obviously Hakeem Williams, he's kind of the next guy in the ladder in terms of big bodied receivers that you would like to see take the next step this year. So I think if you're looking at Benson 1, Williams 2, Portier 3, maybe I'm forgetting another guy in there. Jaylen Brown 4 coming out of the slot there with his speed. There's options there, but I think Benson and then probably Hakeem at 2.
Jared,
that's funny. That's funny because I would name different people.
Go ahead. Really? That's what we're doing this for.
Yeah, in Nick's opinion is just as good as mine.
That's right. Everybody's got one.
Yeah, but to me, Ja'Kai Douglas he's a playmaker and he's been a very dependable guy. And first people that come to my mind would be Ja'Kai, his brother Lucas, and Hakeem Williams as 3 guys that I feel like what you got there. Now, I've always liked Poitier, but he's been hurt. Mm-hmm. And I think he comes into this year, both he and Williamson, as they should be fresh. They should be healthy. And both of those guys are capable. I mean, I agree with Nick that you got to have Poitier in the conversation. Because I think he has NFL potential.
Yeah, and they're going to play 6 to 8 receivers over the course of the season on a fairly regular basis. But it's just so crazy to think. Last year you felt like you had very few holes at your receiver core because your frontline guys were so good, and now we think that they got potential because obviously we think that Florida State's done a very good job of evaluating talent, and then the wins bear that out, right? I mean, you win with Jimmys and Joes more so than X's and O's. I think it is the fascinating question on this offense, because I agree with you. I think Ja'Kai has proven himself. We saw him kind of take over in parts of the Pitt game last year when Keon was out with some sort of lower body injury, and then he obviously was used as a jack of all trades in the exhibition game down there in Miami. He made some, and he's shown the ability to make tough catches at times. Like I can't remember the game, but he had one unbelievable catch, and it may have been the Pitt game. So I kind of agree with you with Ja'Kai being there. Then I think it's kind of wide open. I think it's going to be a fascinating group of guys to watch during fall practice, and obviously Bob and Kurt will watch that battle more than I will, because we kind of split up practice, and I usually go towards the offensive line when they're doing 7-on-7s and 1-on-1s. Listen, you guys saw more of Malik than I did in the spring. Everyone season enamored with him. He was the top junior college receiver in America before he signed with Alabama. Spent 1 year in Tuscaloosa. Did not do a whole lot. I don't know how much you read into that because of the breadth of talent that they have at Alabama. Sean Murphy was the number one inside linebacker. We're going to talk about a little bit later. Didn't play much. Terrence Ferguson didn't play much, or DJ Ferguson didn't play much while he was at Alabama. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think he's kind of the wild card of that group. Everybody talks about him being able to take the top off the defense. And then I think, obviously, Des Hill, I thought was having a really good spring until he got hurt. I thought he was going to be a guy that could be a go-to guy. We saw flashes of that in the last fall. So I think and then listen, I agree with you. Darion Williamson, at times, all of us have been fascinated with his potential. And he was starting to make some progress last year. I think he caught a pass in one game, in the first half of one game, and nice little bench route. And next thing you know, he's out of the game, and you don't see him for a couple games. So,
yeah, that was Southern Miss, I believe. I think that was the Southern Miss game.
And so I think it's going to be interesting to see, if he's one of those guys that maybe development was studded last year because of who they brought in, and there wasn't a whole lot of balls to go around. With Keon and Johnny and Johnny Wilson and Jaheim and Trey that being there. So I think it's going to be, and you had Morlock obviously there as well. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see. Then, hey, we've always said it's easier to help as a true freshman the further away you play from the ball. And so those are receivers and cornerbacks and running backs generally that make so maybe one of these guys, a BJ Gibson or a Fryer, surprises. So I think it's going to be fun to watch. And then, of course, we'll see how it goes. But that's why they're going to practice. And then, of course, moving to the offensive line, guys, we've written about this. We really seem to think that I feel like Darius Washington is locked in at left tackle, Maurice at center, and then obviously Byers as a 4-year starter, both at UTEP and now Florida State as at right tackle. I think the question is at guard, both guard spots. We've seen additional bodies be brought in. They now brought Jacob Brizzi in over the summer from Harvard. He started at tackle for Harvard, but the intentions for Florida State are to play him inside at center or guard. Where that is, we're not real sure. Listen, you had Leonard and Richie Leonard, the transfer from Florida, and Keandre Jones were split most of the reps at right guard in the spring. And then you had a combination of TJ Ferguson, Bryson Estes, and Julian Armella at the left guard spot. Now you bring in Rizzi. I'm sure they're going to work him at center and guard. And listen, this is a great problem to have. As I wrote in the story, this is competitive depth. This is not like we were sitting in the press box 3 years ago, and if so-and-so went out, we're like, who the hell are they going to put in there? Because you could have put a statue in there, and that's what you would have gotten. So this is a good problem to have. But how do you guys were both at spring practices, how do you guys see the guard position play out? And listen, go back to that competitive depth. You've got multiple guys that have started games that will not start this year. Robert Scott will probably not be the starter at left tackle. Not if Mike Norvell thinks Jerry Washington is an All-American, right? And Robert Scott's played a lot of football at Florida State, so it's good competitive depth. So, what do y'all expect to happen with the guard battles, and who do you like?
Jerry, if you want to go first,
I'll go first. Just there's like Ferguson and Leonard. And others are giants. I mean, you're looking at some guys that are, 330 pounds, 340 pounds. Rizzi is not that guy. Rizzi's more that 290 type, I think. Might be a little heavier than
They
that.
got him listed at 308, but to your point,
Yeah.
that's lighter than most of the offensive line.
Yeah, it's 30 pounds lighter than the other guards. Estes is what is Estes listed at? 320 or 315?
I believe Bryson is listed as 285.
Oh, is
he is the smallest offensive lineman.
Okay.
Darius Washington 310, Keandre Jones 337, Armella 325, Ferguson 330, Leonard 331. I don't think there's 1 pound of difference between those two, but that's fine. I'm not going to argue. Argue 325. Otto 325. Byers 331.
So, at any rate, so Estes is the smallest of them, followed by, I guess, Rizzi.
Yep.
And both of those two are candidates to play center, Estes or Rizzi. So, at any rate, they've got a great situation there. I don't see. I don't think they have a need for Rizzi at guard. I think they got a bunch of guys they like at that position, but I think they've brought him in more to work him at center, but we'll see.
Yeah, and he's got 2 years left, so it's going to be interesting to see where they put him. And I think that they will. He went to Harvard, so he's probably a smart guy. Don't feel like I'm stepping on too big a limb there. So he could probably learn multiple positions, and I do think that they've got to. I think another thing that would be crucial for this offensive line, particularly because you're going to play Darius at left tackle, and with Robert Scott's injury history, I think that you've got. I don't think you want to be moving Darius back to center. I think you want it to be Rizzi or Estes that is fully locked in.
Yeah, I mean, it could be Otto.
Yeah, well, I love Otto, and he may give old Byers more of a run for his money than I'm anticipating. But I do think that's going to be interesting. I think, and we'll talk about this later. But I think Otto is a guy that may pick up playing time the deeper we get into the year. Right? We've seen Mike and Alex pull guys at the end of the first half who weren't playing well and play somebody else the entire second half. So, but Otto is certainly going to be fun to look at or watch. As that battle continues, but I think the guard battle is going to be quite fascinating. All right, guys, go to tight end. You lose Jaheim Bell and Biscuit, but you got Kyle Morlock back. I'll simply ask you. We know what Kyle can do. He's a pass catching tight end. He is listed at 240. I would believe that he would have to be soaking wet to be 240 and wearing a lot of clothes. Where and listen, when Mike got here and Alex got here and Chris Thompson got here, they blocked around the tight ends, it seems. So I don't think it's alarming that you don't have what would be considered a traditional unit tight end that strength of his game is blocking. Even Jackson West, who's now listed at 235, even he was a pass-catching tight end. In fact, he never lined up on the end of the line of scrimmage in high school. He was always a slot or outside receiver. How do you guys, and Jerry, I'll start with you. What do you see out of the tight end position? What are your concerns? What do you think is good about the tight end slot?
I think they're all serviceable. I think they all run good routes and can catch the ball, and they know the offense. I say all of them, but Jackson West and Morlock for sure. I wonder when we get into short yardage if we'll have an inline tight end or whether we'll have another tackle out there. I think there's some things you can do if you don't have a true big inline tight end in those situations. But that would be my only concern is how good of run blockers are they going to be if they're in line.
Yep. And then, of course, the running back room, I think, obviously, I think the surprise of spring for all of us. Now, I think he's going to play multiple positions, but we knew about Toafili. You felt pretty good about Rodell Williams because he had a track record at Alabama. So there were no surprises when he came in. You felt good about him. I think the guy that kind of makes this interesting, or two guys really, are Jalen Lucas, a transfer from Indiana, who kind of media favorite. He's kind of an easy guy to pull for, very undersized. He is listed at 5'9", 175. I believe the 175 part. I'm not sure I believe the 5'9" part, but he's more like 5'6", 5'7", and I'll stop at 5'7". But anyway, he's fun to watch. He's dynamic. He's hard to tackle. He's hard to find. And then you got Cam Davis, who was having a good spring and who suffered a minor injury that he did not finish the spring. I think he sat out the spring game and maybe the last week of spring. But there's a lot of people that think that he looked good enough to contribute. And we haven't even talked about Keziah Holmes yet. So what do you guys, Nick? I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the running back room?
I mean, it's going to be a position.
Singleton.
Yeah, him too. I mean, the running back room is going to continue to be a position of strength for a long time, as long as this coaching staff is here at Florida State. It's funny that Jerry brought up Jalen Lucas in terms of the wide receiver conversation to bring the background to that, because I always figured that Lucas was going to be primarily used out of the backfield, either running out to the flat, screen game, that type of thing. So depending on whether you see him as more like a scat back coming out of the backfield or you see him in the slot as more of a wide receiver, that's one of the things that we'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, this running back room is strong. I think Rodell Williams is going to pick up right where Benson left off, maybe not have quite the impact that Benson did. And obviously Benson took a little bit of a while to get going in both of his seasons at Florida State, but I think Williams is going to pick up that torch of the hard running kind of workhorse back, and then Toafili is just going to continue to be a leader as a receiving back out of the backfield, and then wherever Lucas lines up, he's going to be. When Mike Norvell says his offense is for playmakers, those are the types of guys, really shifty, really elusive, and you get them in open field and see what they can do.
That's going to be fun to see if Mike can create some situations where he can get man coverage with the middle linebacker stuck on the back and motion Lucas out of the backfield. But I agree with you. I think he's going to line up Lucas a little bit of everywhere. I think he's going to run the ball in the backfield. I think he's going to line up in the slot. I don't see him being used very much as an outside receiver. But listen, I think we were all blown away. I remember the first time I saw him run, I was like, who's that walk-on? Because he had just gotten on campus in January. We had not seen him. That was the first practice of spring, and I had never seen that number before, and quite honestly, I had not looked at the roster at that day at practice. I was just like, I'm going to let who stand out by what they do on the practice field. I'm not going to look for them, and he was certainly one of the guys that stood out. So I think he's going to be fun to watch. But, yeah, Florida State looks very deep at running back, very deep at offensive line. DJU needs to stay healthy, or they need to get Luke and Brock ready. You got some questions at wide receiver, full of potential, and really, as I said, you would like to have one of your strengths at tight end to be you had a guy that can run block, but we've seen Mike and Alex be able to game plan around a weak offensive line and a tight end room that didn't have a lot of great blockers when they first got here. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, just like the offense, you lost a lot of frontline players. The first two that come to mind, obviously, are defensive end Jared Verse and defensive tackle Braden Fisk. But you feel really good about Florida State, who at defensive end has Patrick Payton coming back, brought in Marvin Jones from Georgia, brought in Sione Lalehi from Oregon State. They did bring in Tommy Jurajay, but it looks like he's going to be at defensive tackle. But you got Byron Turner back. And you got Jaden Jones back. So, Jerry, what are your thoughts on the defensive end room? I think that, I'm not sure that, we talked a little bit about, is it as deep as it was last year? Maybe. I don't think they had a lot of depth there last year. I think that maybe they are deeper. And I think maybe it's time for, Patrick Payton, he said he learned a lot from watching how hard Jared Verse and Braden Fisk work. I think it's time for him to put on the leadership crown on that defense. And I think what we'd like to see out of him is him not only be the best player physically from a tool player on that front, but also the best leadership guy. But what are your thoughts on the defensive end position?
Yeah, I would agree with what you just said. I mean, I think there's not as big a drop off from 1 to 2 this year because of, you got Patrick will be a better Patrick than he was last year, I would think. Marvin is certainly he's a force that they're going to have to account for. And then the guys behind him bring experience they didn't have last year. So I'm high on the defensive ends. And let me just say this: a guy that we've left out of this discussion at the tackle position is Daryl Jackson.
Oh, we're going to get to the tackles.
But when we talk about we lost Fisk, well, we gained Jackson, and so that front, it's none of these positions stand alone. They're going to have to account for those tackles, and that's going to free defensive ends up to do a little damage, I think.
Yeah, and listen, I thought that I wasn't sure how fired up I was about when MJ Jr. came in. I had very conservative expectations for him when he signed with Florida State, coming in, transferring from Georgia. But I kind of think he's done the same thing that Braden Fisk did last year, and Jared Verse did for me the year before that. I remember when Jared came in to replace Jermaine, we said, don't get excited. He's not going to be Jermaine Johnson. And he wasn't Jermaine Johnson, but he was every bit as impressive, just a different type of player. I do think that we're going to probably see the same thing with Marvin Jones Jr. I think he does elevate that room more than I thought he would when they brought him in. I was not sure I'm not sure what we would get. And then I think Lole, he's a very solid player who can give you quality reps and possibly be your starter on the other side. What about you, Nick?
Let me just say, Pat, I think you could have made that same statement about Marvin Jones even after the first week or 10 days of spring. He came on, I thought, in the latter half of spring practice where he began to feel comfortable with what they wanted from him. And I think he can be a very dominant player. And I wasn't sure that I could say that after 10 days of spring or 5 days of spring.
Yeah. Nick, what about you on the defensive ends?
Yeah, I agree with you, especially in terms of the depth that was there. Obviously, you had Patrick Payton and Jared Verse opposite of each other. But after that last year, you had Gilbert Edmond and Gilbert Edmond, wasn't spectacular at his time in his time here, so much so that he went back to where he came from. But when you talk about this year, you immediately have names that you can plug in of guys that, at least at first glance, you say, okay, those are guys that the production doesn't drop off quite as severely, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier. Yep. So, defensive, and I think they definitely have gotten deeper there. To where, and especially as we saw, last season, where you get into, the postseason where, having energy and being, more rested because you're cycling guys in and out matters. That's definitely going to, help Florida State. This year, hopefully.
Yeah, and then of course you move inside, and of course, as Jerry's alluded to, I think we've all been fired up to see him now for. He's been on campus almost 2 years, and we haven't seen him play. He's been on campus a year and a half, and that's Daryl Jackson. Listen, we saw him at times unblockable in spring practice, and then you couple him with Josh Farmer. I think Florida State's got a chance to have probably the best starting 2 defensive tackles in the ACC because they both can be dominant players at times, and Farmer has just seemed to get better and better. And listen, let's be honest, this is their money year, right? I mean, both these kids want to come out after their redshirt junior years. I don't think there's any secret about that. They've been here in college 4 years. I think they got a chance to be really good. I think the questions on defensive line are after that. Where does the production come from? Because Grady Kelly's a solid player, been a solid player at Colorado State, but I don't think he's Braden Fisk. And listen, I do like the promise of some of the young guys. KJ Sampson is a guy that's been impressive. I think we all like what we've seen at times out of Daniel Lyons. But Jerry, I'll pop back to you. What are your thoughts on the interior defensive line?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the starters, and I love them in combination with the ends. I think the 4 starters Florida State has could be as good as we've had in last year. or years past. I think, those 4 could be really good. Now, I have a little question about the interior, when you go from the starters to the number 2 guy. Lyons has experience. I like him. Like you said, Sampson, I like. But
I think Durajay is going to help that group out because I think he's he's still a young player. He's only a redshirt sophomore going into this year, but he's like Nick, you were there when he came in for his official visit with me. We both looked at him and said, "That's not a defensive end. That's a future defensive tackle." And and we thought that they might play him for one season at defensive end. When he first got here, because he could get to 300 pounds and grow in the defensive tackle body. But I do think that there is a need to go ahead and slide him inside, and I think he's going to help that position.
And if I'm not mistaken, they did some of that with Jaden Jones too, didn't they?
Yeah, I think I saw some of that, but I think it was more nickel type stuff than it was.
Nickel.
Yeah. So and I think, and listen, Jaden. I think we saw him become a little bit more. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to bust out this year, but he is a redshirt junior, and he's up to 240. And I think, Jerry, you may have been the person that told me during practice this spring that it finally looks like he's got some confidence coming off that surgery that he came in with his first year at Florida State, which was last year.
Yeah, I think I did say that. It appeared to me he seemed to be playing full speed.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be another interesting group to watch. And listen, we see it every year, and there'll be surprises, good and bad, at every position, right? Somebody's going to take the next step, somebody's going to regress, and maybe they don't regress, but maybe it's because somebody just overreaches and passes them by. So I think that's going to be fun. Now, linebackers, listen, this group is still fascinating to me. This is Jerry's favorite position group of all. Listen, you got one proven starter in this group. That's DJ Lundy, who has not really been a regular starter. He has started some, has played a tremendous amount of football, looked really good in the spring, guys. I thought, Nick, I thought he looked as good as he's looked any time in his career. What are your thoughts on DJ?
No, I would have to agree. I think, getting him back in terms of, getting him back from Colorado, which he was going to go to in the transfer portal, that was probably one of the most important transfer portal additions, if you even call it an addition, right? Yep. That was probably sneakily one of the best moves that Florida State made in that window. And look, he's come in and he's worked for it, and he has looked a lot better. And he's going to need to be a leader in that linebacker room and in that defense. So he has flashed in the past. He certainly flashed a little bit last year, but obviously we all know that once that responsibility of being the guy gets put on your shoulders, see how he handles the quote unquote pressure.
And what's amazing is he's a redshirt senior. That is so hard to believe that he's been here 5 years. Jerry, listen, you've got Omar. I have Florida State projected as DJ Lunder is a starter, what I call the Mike linebacker. Inside, it's a 4-2-5, so it's hard to get caught up in names. But I did ask somebody familiar with the program today what they call their linebackers, and they still call them Will and Mike. I've seen another organization call them field and boundary linebackers. I've never heard that. But I've got DJ Lundy, Omar Graham, and I know you're a fan of, and so am I, of Justin Cryer as those Mike-type linebackers that will play this year. What are your thoughts on those three guys getting the job done at what we're going to call Mike or inside linebacker?
I've got a high degree of confidence in it. I mean, I think Lundy's gotten better each year, to where you can depend on him. And I like Cryer, as you said. I think he's an underrated guy. He's a big guy that can run, and he seems very comfortable in the defense.
He seems to have some natural instincts to his game.
No, he's better. He's better in pass coverage than you'd think too. I mean, there's a couple times this spring where we're on the sidelines and then we hear a bunch of commotion and Cryer's running the other way on a pick. So
he's I like him a lot. Omar Graham is an instinct player. He reminds me of Bethune, but. I think we're good at that position. I think we'll be fine. I don't know if you want to switch to the other position.
Oh, I do want to switch to the other position because I think it's one of the more fascinating battles in camp because I've got, again, you see different services putting different things out on depth charts, but I've got it as entering camp as Blake Nicholson or Sean Murphy, the transfer from Alabama. And then you throw a new wrinkle in with the addition of Cam Riley over the summer, who was mainly an outside linebacker at Auburn in a 3-4 defense. So I think the thing with Cam, having not seen him at Florida State and Florida State's defense, I think that he is more athletic. He's athletic, and I think he's going to have to play on what we call the will linebacker or outside linebacker, even though they line up in the box a good majority of the time.
Yeah,
I just don't know how he fits into this defense. Are you plugging a round hole into a square peg type of thing? But I do think those are the three guys that are going to battle it out. Listen, I told you guys all along, we've talked about this. We've talked about depth charts before. I think that just because of the way Blake runs versus today's spread RPO offenses, I think he's a guy I think will ultimately lead the job, win that job coming out of camp. But even if he does, you really need Murphy or Riley to be able to fill that backup role behind him, because I don't know who else it's going to be outside of Jaden Parrish, who's a true freshman. And listen, we saw Blake play some as a true freshman last year and played more and more as the season went on. So maybe that's the plan with Jaden. But what do you guys think about that will linebacker position? Or I heard another somebody called it the boundary linebacker spot.
No, I like Parrish. I do, but I don't think that he's going to
so hard as a true freshman, man.
It's hard as a true freshman. So I think really the X factor is how fast can Cam Riley catch up in terms of some of the other linebackers like Murphy that got here in the spring. If Riley can come in the summer and he makes good progress and he looks good in fall camp, I think it's pretty easy to say, okay, Nicholson, and then Cam Riley at the 1-2 there. But after that, I mean, maybe you kind of weave in at some of the linebackers like Omar Graham, who they're going to be filing in potentially into the Mike slot of things. So I just think it really depends on how much and how fast Cam Riley can come in and potentially contribute if he is to at all. Yeah,
I think it's going to be interesting, and I can't wait to see the kid. I've never seen. I can't remember. I don't think I've ever seen a 6'5", 230.
Pat, I don't think he's 6'5". I saw him at the press conference.
Yeah,
I mean, they report him at 6'5", but I was thinking he don't look 6'5" to me.
Yeah, the last 6'5", 6'6" linebacker I remember at Florida State was old Sterling Palmer, who eventually moved to defensive end. And I just wonder if there's any thought of moving Cam to defensive end once they get him on the field. So we'll see how that works out. Talked about.
I kind of asked that question during the, our press opportunity with him about where they plan to play him, and he said, completely inside. That he was an inside linebacker at Auburn, and that they flexed him out, into space. But he went on to explain that the game of football, with the offenses spreading, it's just become a green grass game. And if you can play in space, then you can be valuable. But when I saw 6'5", I wondered, can a guy, how many guys 6'5" do you see playing linebacker?
There have been a few, but you don't see many over 6'4". Urlacher's 6'4" guy. You got a lot of those guys running around the NFL, but you don't have a ton of 6'5", 6'6" inside linebackers. And he's not. Listen, I think he's brought here to play outside linebacker / defensive end, whatever scheme they're running at the time. But yeah, I think the competition between we've got some disagreement on this internally within our organization. We've got a Nicholson clan and we got a Murphy clan. So
yeah, well, I'm probably I'm kind of straddling that.
Well, both of them are going to play, so
both going to play.
It's a matter of where.
It's okay to straddle on this.
Yeah, I mean, Nicholson's got some stuff to prove to me yet. I'm a fan. I mean, I like the kid, and the same with Murphy. I mean, Murphy just didn't, wow me this spring. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think, and sometimes I think because he transferred in from Alabama, I think that sometimes our expectations are a little bit over the top. We
There's
sit
a
there,
stigma.
ACC fans and Florida State fans give Alabama crap all the time. But when we get a player in from Alabama, it's like, hey, he's from Alabama, man. He's going to be an All-American. And I think what we saw is he's still very much a player in the developmental stages of his college football career.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And listen, he's got to get – this is a totally different defense than they ran at Alabama.
What do they run at Alabama? 4-3?
More of an odd-based defense, yes. More of an odd-based defense than – listen, you can argue that you can run odd concepts out of a 4-2-5, there's no doubt. And FSU plays a lot of heavy what I call a modified heavy technique, where they're asking their tackles a two-gap. I know that, Braden Fisk had a hell of a time adjusting with that. So, and I've talked with Braden since he left Florida State, and, it's not always easy to come in and learn a new technique, particularly when you're as old as Braden was and now Cam is coming into this program. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And Sean, even as he's been in Florida, he's been in Alabama's program for 2 years. And so I think there is, when you're asked to do things fundamentally different, it is hard. And I can only use this, like the way they teach how to stop a bull rush today is totally different than how they taught me when I played college football. And I don't know that I would have to be as successful stunning a bull rush. Well, I'm old now. That'd be the one reason I would not be.
And lacking a knee.
But I don't know that when I played that I could have successfully pulled off the technique Florida State uses as opposed to where I played. I think if the two coaches had used those, if there were different philosophies on how to stop a bull rush in 1990, I would have wanted to play it one way versus the other. That's hard on a player. So anyway, I think it's going to be fun to watch what happens there at the will linebacker position. And then to finish it out with the defensive backs, listen, this is a group that's got a blend of experienced talent with some young guys who have big-time potential. Our starting lineup has Fintrell Cypress and AZ Thomas at corner. I think AZ is about to have a breakout year. I think you guys would probably agree with me there. But then you got Shaheem Brown, Conrad Hussey as your safeties. That's what we have going in. You have Earl Little as your nickel. Just talk a little bit about the front line defensive backs, Nick.
Yeah, I think in terms of what they have back there, Conrad was really impressive in his true freshman year. He saw the ability to play the pass really well. Obviously, he's got a bit of a thumper on him. He can really hit. I remember, I think it was Virginia Tech on his birthday when he had an interception and a forced fumble or something like that, a massive hit. So in the back end, I know safety is a concern for some people, but I think, now that you have Shaheem getting another year full starting, I think he's going to be dependable. And Conrad really impressed me out of the safeties. And, you get returning guys with Fentrell, who certainly came on a little bit later. And AZ, I think, is going to have a special year. I think he's going to be one of the next guys when you talk about guys and dudes that come out of the cornerback position at Florida State. And
another guy that's hard to believe he's in his third year, right?
Yeah.
He could be gone after this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So the real question is, who they're going to move into the nickel. Some people think it's going to be Earl Little. Some people think it might be somebody else. But with the departure of Jarian Jones, who really kind of came into his own at that position, and kind of had that be the ideal of what you want at that position towards the latter end of the season. That's really the only question that I think we all probably have heading into camp at in terms of the defensive axis, who's going to take up the mantle there. And, they have a lot of options. They lost one in Greedy Vance, who went to USC. So that's who, prior to his transferring, I would have been like, okay, that's the obvious choice because he had played a lot of nickel. But now
you get Kevin Knowles back.
Yeah. Whippy. But yeah, so that's kind of.
Well, he has played nickel for Florida State. And I remember walking out of Ben Hill Griffin Stadium about 4 years ago, everybody praising Kevin Knowles for the job he did in that game that we lost by a couple of points where they snapped the ball over Jordan's head or whatever the hell happened towards the end of the ball game. But so listen, I agree. And listen, the guy that I think is going to a superstar in the making is Quindarius Jones. I'd almost wish they'd move him to will linebacker, but he hadn't quite put on enough weight. But we've heard a lot of positive things about Edwin Joseph being very talented physically, just needs to maybe kind of grow up a little bit. And, listen, I said this when the NIL stuff started, guys. These kids got to grow up quicker than they ever had before, because it's as Mark Salva, who is one of our Osceola football analysts, likes to say, this is a meritocracy. It's built on what have you done for me lately on the football field. And so everyone talks a bit big about Edwin. We got to see it. And then I think a guy that we've always kind of liked, and he got hurt and lost some time, KJ Kirkland, and then Jabril Rawls had some really good practices. But Jerry, just talk about that group as a whole, where you got Rawls and Barker and Devontae Brown transferred in as a backup, KJ Kirkland, Jones, and we haven't even talked about Charles Lester or Damari Howard.
Yeah, and don't we also get a transfer coming back to Florida State?
Kevin Knowles, yeah.
Oh no, Amarion Cooper.
Oh, I'm sorry, Amarion Cooper. That's right.
Yeah,
I got confused for a second.
I think he played. Didn't he play a little nickel for us too?
Yes, that's what I meant. I meant Amarion instead of Kevin. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I was like, well, you had him back, and that makes my Whippy seem a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're like,
no. I got confused for a second. A lot of guys running through my head right now.
There's a lot of options back there.
Yeah. So I think Jerry. So Jerry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So no, overall, I think you've got your frontline starters I'm very confident in, and then to your point, guys like Jabril Rawls are probably going to have to play a little bit early, and a couple other guys. There's talent, but there's inexperience. If we had a few injuries, we'd be depending on some young guys. So
yeah,
that's my only concern in the secondary.
Yeah, hopefully, listen, we know they're going to try to rotate. They'd like to be 2 deep at every position. It's going to be interesting to see where they can get to 2 deep. But it's going to be fun to watch some of these young guys develop. And listen, even a guy that comes in with Earl Little didn't play a lot at Alabama. We still got to learn a little bit about him. How does he do when the bullets are flying? We have not seen these guys in full scale. So I do think there's some questions there. But obviously, when you go out there and watch on the field, guys, tremendous length, size, and athleticism back there. Now it's about, can they make it happen on Saturdays? I think that's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, another freshman that we didn't mention, but Kai Bates, who came early as well. I think he's probably looked better than Lester earlier on. Now, that doesn't mean anything. Obviously, we haven't seen him in a couple of months, but if somebody goes down the back end, Florida State is going to be relying on some younger talent that are going to have to grow up pretty quickly. Quindarius Jones is a good shout, Pat, because he's kind of somebody that he did get some play in garbage time last year, and we certainly saw him improve over the year, but especially with new faces coming in and some younger guys that maybe popped a little bit more than he did. He's a name that might have been swept under the rug a little bit that can be really, really good.
He was my favorite player coming out of that class he signed with. I could be wrong, but I think that kid at some point is just going to take off. All right, to close this thing out, because we've been going on, as we're apt to do, longer than we anticipated. We were hoping to get this done in 45 minutes. We're now at the hour and 6 minute mark. But listen, you got to feel really good about the special teams. You get Ryan Fitzgerald back, who had an outstanding year last year. And then, of course, you get the maestro of punting, Alex Mastromano, back, and the maestro will be back for another year. I saw various magazines that have him listed as an All-American, first-team preseason All-American, best punter in college football. So it's always fun to watch Alex kick a ball. I just hope they don't allow him to throw another pass. We've seen how that is. And of course, the biggest question you got on special teams this year is, how do you replace a All-American long snapper? So I don't know who that's going to be, but you did have an All-American at long snapper last year in James
Rosenberry.
Rosenberry, who, by the way, might have, when they went on break from the end of the season to the bowl game, he traveled somewhere and might have ordered the biggest pizza I've ever seen. It's on his social media account. You should go back and look at it. It's impressive. It's bigger than that place here in town that has such big slices. What is the Momos? Momos. And Momos, you need to be a sponsor. So anyway, guys, listen, it's going to be a fun year. Can't wait. We will be back a lot more regularly. We're going to come out with our schedule for Seminole Sidelines as we get as Kurt and Bob get back from Charlotte tomorrow, and we start to cover practice on Wednesday. But we will have daily updates at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. So please go to theosceola.com and check us out. If you are not a subscriber to the Osceola YouTube channel, please hit subscribe while you're watching this, and please hit the notifications button so that you get notified anytime we go live or air a taped version of Seminole Sidelines, which is always taped live. We don't do a whole lot of editing. We go through and we did some editing right there.
Yep, on the fly editing. I got it.
Nick's got
maybe this one's a little bit better. There we go. Right on Jerry's forehead. Subscribe to Jerry's forehead.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Well, there's to be a lot of people to be interested in what's inside that thing.
Not much.
Yeah. So, but anyway, we'll be back, guys. Jerry, this is our favorite time of year because you and I get to go to football practice.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking forward to that on Wednesday morning, bright and early, and look forward to providing you guys with the best coverage of Florida State football in the 2024 season. So please go to theosceola.com and check us out. Like I said, Bob Ferrante and Kurt Weiler are up in Charlotte, banging out some preseason stories from ACC Kickoff. We've got some stories on why Bob gives us 5 reasons Florida State will make the college football playoffs this year, and 1 reason why they won't. I've got some in-depth look at the offensive guard battle and linebacker battle, and then, of course, you can always go back, and as a team, we went and did position previews. Those are at theosceola.com. And then, of course, recruiting's kind of slowed down in the middle of July, but you can obviously look at all our evals and all our commitment stories. And, we got some updates on some kids that did not commit to Florida State that could circle back later in the year. But anyway, check us out, theosceola.com. Jerry, Nick, thank you so much for taking time out to join me, and we will see you next time on Seminole Sidelines.